Nowadays, the facts of well-documented Soviet history never really change. What does change is the Kremlin's interpretation of the past. This revisionism has been most prominent in events surrounding Joseph Stalin's forced 1930s famine against millions of peasants, the majority Ukrainian, a policy of collectivization that led to mass starvation of millions of people. Attempts at reinterpretation were highlighted most recently by the Kremlin-funded propaganda outlet Sputnik News, which ran this English-language piece, Holodomor Hoax, the autonomy of a lie invented by West's propaganda machine. It's this report that Kathy Young from the US-based news website The Daily Beast has set out to debunk. But firstly, let's look at an extract from the Sputnik article published on October the 19th by Ekaterina Blinova, who is described on her Twitter account as an independent political analyst. She wrote, "The roots of the famine genocide propaganda campaign lay in a series of articles written by noted journalist, traveller and student of Russian affairs Thomas Walker. The articles described the horrific famine of 1932 to 1933 in Ukraine, while photographs accompanying the stories portrayed desperate victims of the famine. It turned out later, noted journalist Thomas Walker had never visited Ukraine in 1932 to 1933. Furthermore, he never existed." But in the Daily Beast, Young argues that the evidence for what Blinova calls the West's Holodomor hoax seems to overwhelmingly rely on only one source. It mainly boils down to the fact that one sensational account on the famine in the Western press, a 1935 series in the Hearst papers by Thomas Walker, was demonstrably fraudulent. Walker, aka Robert Greene, a conman and convicted forger, claimed to have witnessed starvation in Ukraine in 1934 and used photos from an earlier Soviet famine in the 1920s. But this malfeasance doesn't disprove the Holodomor any more than Benjamin Wilkomirski's phony memoirs of surviving as a Jewish orphan in Auschwitz cast doubt on the Holocaust. The Daily Beast article then goes on to analyse what facts were missed out of Sputnik's analysis, including of reports on the famine by British journalists Gareth Jones and Malcolm Muggeridge 2 years before Walker's accounts by two Russian Jewish writers who could hardly be suspected of pro-Nazi sympathies, and, quote, "Of course, she, the Sputnik News author, does not say a word about declassified documents, such as government decrees imposing draconian punitive measures on villages that failed to meet grain production quotas, including confiscation of all food and a complete cut-off of supplies." Young finishes her Daily Beast article with a more general analysis about how the Kremlin-backed news outlets and its army of trolls aim to confuse audiences by muddying the waters through alternative narratives. Blinova's article also seems to be part of a concerted campaign rather than a one-off contrarian opinion. A fairly similar piece under the same byline, Holodomor Hoax, Joseph Stalin's crime that never took place, ran on Sputnik News in August. The intent seems clear: to cast doubt, at least among the more gullible segments of the Western public, on an earlier Moscow regime's crimes against Ukraine, whilst also tarnishing pro-independence Ukrainians with the Nazi brush. Young concludes by saying Russia may not truly be back to the USSR, but the propaganda machine, it seems, has come full circle. That's all we have time for on the Press Review. This is Ukraine Today.